My name is Marin Vance. I'm 38, and I found out exactly what my parents thought I was worth on a Saturday afternoon at a family reunion when my mother pointed one manicured finger toward a swinging kitchen door and told me to go sit with the hired help. She said it sweetly. That's the part that still surprises people. There was no shouting, no slammed plate. She just smiled the way she smiles in church and said, in front of 40-some relatives, "Sit with the hired help, sweetheart. That's your class." And my father, standing right beside her, looked at his shoes and said nothing at all. What I did in the next 40 minutes erased 11 years and $312,000, and not 1 cent of it came out of my mouth as a scream. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I picked up a folded card off a table, walked to a front desk, and made the lakeside venue I had booked for all 50 of them simply cease to exist around them. But the thing that actually broke them wasn't the cancellation. It was a single laminated place card with my name printed on it, the one my mother had set at the staff table by the dish pit that I slid back across the linen 40 minutes later without saying a word. I'll get to that card. It's the hinge the whole day turns on. If you've ever been the one your family treats as the help, the one who pays, fixes, drives, hosts, and is still somehow not quite good enough to sit at the table you bought, then this story is for you. And you already know the exact temperature of the air in a room like that. Drop a comment and tell me the one thing your family always made you do that they would never once thank you for. And subscribe, because the next one finds people who need it most, and you might be one of them. Let me tell you who I was before that day, because it matters. It's the whole engine of what happened. I grew up in a town where everyone knew which families had the lake houses and which families cleaned them. We were the second kind. My mother, Patrice, worked the cosmetics counter at a department store 2 towns over and came home smelling like 40 perfumes and resentment. My father, Glenn, ran a small lumber and hardware supply that was always one bad winter from closing. I learned early that money in our house was a weather system. You watched it, you braced for it, you never controlled it. My grandfather Walt was the one good thing. He'd been a banquet captain at a big resort up north for 30 years, and he taught me that hospitality wasn't servitude. It was a kind of quiet power. The person who controls the room, he told me, is never the loudest one in it. It's the one who knows where the lights are. He died when I was 26 and left me $5,000 and a steno pad full of his notes on how to run an event so smoothly nobody notices it's being run. I used the $5,000 as a down payment on my first thing. By the time I was 38, that first thing had become a hospitality and events company with 3 properties and a staff of 60. We did weddings, corporate retreats, anniversary galas, and the crown of it, the one I'd bought 4 years earlier and rebuilt with my own crews, was a property on the water called Heron Point. A lodge, a banquet pavilion, a string of 12 cabins, a long dock running out into a lake so still at dawn it looked like poured glass. I'm telling you that detail now, plainly, because the family didn't know it. They knew I did something with parties. They never once asked the name of the place. I read a contract the way other people read a weather app, looking for the line that's going to ruin the weekend. I knew every cancellation clause, every deposit term, every guarantee I'd ever signed. Numbers don't have a favorite child. They just sit there and tell you the truth whether you want it or not. And I was responsible to the point of self-erasure. That's the kindest way I can say it. I was the daughter you could call at 2 a.m. I was the one who co-signed, fronted, covered, hosted. I had spent so many years being needed that I'd quietly decided being needed was the same as being loved. If you've ever been the dependable one, you already know that's a lie you tell yourself because the truth is lonelier. Here is the thing they never let me forget, the sentence I'd carried for 13 years. When I was 25 and told my mother I was starting a business with Grandpa Walt's money, she laughed. Not cruelly, just certainly. And said, "Marin, honey, some people are made to host the party and some people are made to clean up after it. Know your class." Brielle, my younger sister, was in the room. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me with that soft pity she'd perfected. The look that said she agreed but was too polished to say so. Brielle was the bright one, the pretty one, the one they spent on. She'd had the wedding, the photographer flown in, the dress that cost more than my first car. She had the house with the right address and a husband who golfed with the right people. My parents called her our girl who landed well. They called me our Marin, in the tone you'd use for a reliable old appliance. I want to give you the exact numbers because I want you holding them the way I held them. Over 11 years, I quietly paid for this family. Brielle's wedding, $58,000, because Dad's credit was maxed, and Mom cried about the embarrassment. The second mortgage payoff and a new roof on their house, $44,000. The business guarantee I'd signed for Dad's supply company, which the bank called in one ugly spring, $96,000 I paid so my father wouldn't lose everything. Brielle's condo down payment, $30,000. And then the small ones, the truck, the dental work, the dozen just this once transfers. Another $84,000, give or take, scattered across a decade like loose change. $312,000. And I never once said it out loud, because saying it would have made me the kind of person who keeps score, and I had decided long ago that I would rather be unthanked than unkind. So when the reunion came up, the first big one in years, 11 cousins and aunts and uncles flying in, my parents' 40th anniversary tucked inside it like a gift, and my mother said the family deserved something nice for once, somewhere with a little class. I did the thing I always did. I offered to host it, at a lakeside venue. All 50 of them, the whole weekend, on me. I booked Heron Point. You see where this is going, but you don't see how. Stay with me, because the how is the entire point. The package I put together would have made you cry if you saw the invoice. The full pavilion for 2 days. Catering for 50, plated with a raw bar Saturday night. An open bar both evenings. All 12 cabins so the out-of-towners didn't pay for a single hotel. A live trio for the anniversary toast. $41,500, and I never told a soul what it cost, because Grandpa Walt taught me that the moment you mention the price, you've stopped giving a gift and started sending a bill. I let my mother believe she'd found a deal through a friend. I let her hand out the details like she was the hostess. I even let her pick the menu. I have learned that the people who praise you for being easygoing usually just mean you're easy to use, but I didn't mind. I wanted the weekend to be good. I wanted, God help me, for them to look around at the water and the lights I'd hung and think, even for a second, that I'd made something beautiful. I drove up the night before to check on my own cruise. That's a detail I need you to hold on to. My operations director, a woman named Lorraine who'd been with me since the second year, met me at the dock and walked me through the setup. The hired help my mother would gesture at the next day, the servers, the bartender, the 2 cooks in the kitchen, every one of them was on my payroll. Every one of them called me boss. I signed their checks. I knew their kids' names. I want you to remember that, while I tell you the rest. I almost didn't go to the reunion. Isn't that something? The week before, I had a knot in my stomach I couldn't name. And if you've ever been the one who hosts the very people who diminish you, you know that knot. It's your body telling you the truth before your heart is willing to hear it. I went anyway, because being needed felt like being safe, and I wasn't done lying to myself yet. Saturday came up clear and warm, the lake doing its glass trick, the pavilion strung with the lights I'd hung at midnight. Relatives arrived in clumps, hauling coolers and casseroles nobody needed because I'd catered everything. There were hugs. There were the cousins I actually liked. Lorna, technically my great aunt, but only 12 years older than my mom and twice as warm, who grabbed my face in both hands and said, "Look at you. You did all this?" I just smiled and said, "I helped." Grandpa Walt would have been proud of that lie. The seating was assigned. Little laminated place cards at each setting. Calligraphy I'd paid extra for. My mother had insisted on doing the arrangement herself, as the hostess. And I'd let her, because what kind of monster fights their own mother over a seating chart at a party she thinks she's throwing? I found my card last. Everyone was sitting. The head table had my parents, Brielle and her golf husband, the two favorite uncles. The good cousins were spread across the nice tables by the water, and there was no card with my name at any of them. Lorna noticed before I did. I watched her scanning the tables, her face doing the math. And then my mother's voice cut across the pavilion, bright as a bell, pitched to Carrie. "Marin, over here, sweetheart." She was standing by the swinging door to the kitchen. There was a small table back there, a folding card table really, set up for the staff to grab a quick bite between courses, shoved between the dish pit and the walk-in cooler. And on it, one place card. Mine. "We thought you'd be more comfortable back here," she said, smiling at the room as much as at me. "You're so good with all this. The help, the kitchen, all of it. Honestly, Marin, this is more your world. Sit with the hired help. That's your class." A few people laughed. The nervous, social kind of laugh. Brielle looked at her wine. My father looked at his shoes. And somewhere in the kitchen, my bartender, a 23-year-old named Theo, who I'd hired out of a community college program, froze with a tray in his hands because he'd heard her, and he knew exactly who I was. I want to be honest about what happened in my chest in that moment, because everyone expects the woman who gets shoved toward the kitchen to either burst into tears or start screaming. I didn't do either. What I felt was not rage. It was a strange flat clarity, like the surface of that lake at dawn. 13 years of a sentence I'd carried, and here it was again, dressed up in pearls, said out loud in front of everyone I'd flown in and fed and housed. "That's your class." And the clarity said, very quietly, "All right, let's find out whose class it is. If you've ever stood in a room you paid for and been told you don't belong in it, comment the word receipts. I want to know how many of us there are, because I promise you it's more than your family wants you to think." Here's where I have to back up about 3 minutes, to the part the title promised you, because what I did next looked, to the room, like nothing at all. I smiled. I picked up the little card with my name on it, and I said in a perfectly pleasant voice, "Of course. Let me just go check on the kitchen then." And I walked through the swinging door. My mother thought I'd been put in my place. She turned back to the head table, satisfied, and started telling some story about how she'd found this gem of a venue. I heard the room settle behind me. Forks. Laughter. The trio starting a soft number. What I actually did the second that door swung shut was walk straight past Theo and my two cooks, who all stopped and looked at me because they could see my face, and out the back, down the service hall, to the front desk of my own lodge, where Lorraine was working the event with a tablet in her hand. "Lorraine," I said, "I'm canceling the booking." She blinked. "The Marin, the reunion booking?" "The reunion booking. Effective now. Pull the staff off the floor, close the bar, stop the kitchen. We are no longer hosting this event." Now, here is where being the one who reads the contracts matters, and I want to explain the mechanism plainly, because the people who love these stories also hate it when the revenge happens by magic. There was no magic. There was paper. The booking for the reunion was in my name, on my card, under a contract I had written and signed. Host's contract. host's right of cancellation. The host was me, not my mother, who thought she was the hostess, not my father, me. The person paying has the only signature that matters, and they had forgotten, in their whole lives, to ever wonder whose signature that was. I would not give my mother noise. I had spent 13 years giving this family noise, my labor, my money, my swallowed pride. And it had never once moved them. So I would give them paper. When a structure is failing, you don't stand under it and shout. You find the load-bearing element, and you stop holding it up. I was the load-bearing element. I always had been. Marin, Lorraine said gently, because she'd been with me a long time and she could see something had cracked. What happened back there? I told her, in one sentence, what my mother had said. Lorraine, who is 61 and has buried 2 husbands and does not scare, set down her tablet, looked toward the pavilion, and said the thing I'll never forget. Well, she said, then I'd say the help is going home. 4 taps on her tablet. Maybe 20 seconds. The catering hold released, the bar register closed, the staff schedule flipped to event ended. And out in the pavilion, the machine I had built began very quietly to stop. The trio finished their number and looked toward Lorraine for the cue to start the next. Lorraine made a small, flat gesture across her throat. They started packing up their instruments. The servers, who had been about to bring out the entrees, set their trays down in the kitchen and began to break down the line. Theo wiped the bar and started flipping bottles into their cases. The lights I'd hung on a master switch, because I'd wired the pavilion myself. I dimmed from the desk panel until the warm gold went to a flat working white. It took about 4 minutes for the room to notice that the party was disassembling around them. I have to name what I'm holding back here, because this is the part that everyone hopes will turn into an apology, and I need you braced for the fact that it never does. Not from my mother. Not from my father. What came next wasn't anyone realizing they'd been cruel. It was 50 people realizing the food wasn't coming. The group chat. The big family one. 50-some people. The one my mother had named Vance Reunion 2025, with 3 exclamation points. Started lighting up in real time. And I could hear it. All those phones buzzing at once across the pavilion like a swarm waking up. Where's the food going? Why are they packing the bar? Is the party over? What's happening? My mother came through the swinging kitchen door looking for me, and found instead her daughter standing at the front desk of a lodge, perfectly calm, watching the servers carry trays the wrong direction. Marin, she said, and her smile was still on but starting to slip at the corners. What is going on? The staff are taking everything away. Where is dinner? You need to go tell these people. And she gestured at Theo, at Lorraine, at my cooks. You need to tell the help to bring the food. And there it was. The 3rd time. The help. I didn't raise my voice. I want you to understand that part, because by now you know that not raising it was the whole point. I said, I told them to stop, Mom. I'm the one who tells them what to do. She laughed, confused. You don't tell them anything. You're a guest like everyone else. Now go. I'm not a guest. I said it the way you'd read a number off a page. I booked this. I paid for this. $41,500. The whole weekend. All 50 of you. The cabins you're sleeping in. The bar you've been drinking from. The food you were about to eat. It was a gift. I never told you the price because Grandpa Walt taught me you don't bill people for a gift. But you told me to go sit with the hired help. So I went back there. And I told the hired help we're done. My father had come up behind her now. Brielle behind him, phone in hand, the group chat reflected in her wide eyes. A ring of relatives forming at a careful distance, the way people gather at a fender bender. This is the moment I'd been walking toward for 13 years without knowing it, and I did not stand up and make a speech, because I didn't have to. I reached into my blazer pocket and took out the one piece of paper I'd carried up there folded in quarters, not knowing I'd need it, the way you carry an umbrella you hope not to use. The deed. The title to Heron Point, with my name on it, Marin Vance, sole owner. I unfolded it once and set it on the desk facing my mother, the way you'd lay down a winning hand without any expression at all. You told me to sit with the hired help because that's my class, I said. They're my staff. I sign their checks. And the room you're standing in, the dock, the cabins, the lake you've been admiring all afternoon, it's mine. I own it. You've been a guest in my house all weekend and you decided I belonged in the kitchen of it. I have catered 400 events. I know the precise sound a room makes when 50 people stop pretending not to listen. It's not a gasp. It's a silence with a texture to it, a held thing. Lorna, near the front, put her hand over her mouth. Brielle made a small noise. My father's face did something I'd never seen it do. It crumpled, just slightly, like wet paper. My mother's mouth opened and closed, and then she reached for the only tool she'd ever had, which was to make it my fault. Marin, she said, after everything we've done for you, you'd embarrass your own family in front of... Everything you've done for me, I repeated, and I let it hang, and then I picked up the laminated place card she'd set me at the dish pit table, the one with my name on it in the calligraphy I'd paid extra for, and I slid it across the desk to sit beside the deed. My name on a card at the staff table. My name on the deed to the building, side by side. You put my name here, I said, touching the place card. I'd already put it here. I touched the deed. You just never once turned the building over to check whose it was. It's handled, I thought. But I didn't say it, because some sentences are better kept. I told Theo and the servers to take the trays back to the kitchen, plate the food properly, and feed themselves and any guest who wanted to stay and eat like a human being instead of a prop. Then I walked out to the dock to let the lake do its work on my heartbeat, and I left 50 people to discover what a family looks like when the person who'd been holding it up lets go. Here's how it came apart, and I'm telling you the truth, which is that none of it was satisfying in the way you think it'll be. It was just clarifying. The food situation resolved itself. Theo, bless him, ran the kitchen like the professional he is, and most of the relatives, the decent ones, ended up eating at the staff table by the dish pit, which I find I can laugh about now. The cousins I liked drifted out to the dock to find me. Lorna sat down beside me with 2 plates and said, I always wondered why you never let your mother near your work. Now I know. You didn't want her to find out you'd outgrown her. She squeezed my hand. Your grandfather would have sat right here with you. But inside the pavilion, the family was turning on itself, and I want you to hear how, because this is the karma part, and the karma was never something I did. It was just the thing that was already true, finally allowed to be visible. My mother went after my father first. I heard about this later from Lorna, who has the gift of total recall and no loyalty to liars. The second the relatives started murmuring, Patrice rounded on Glenn and hissed that this was his fault, that he'd always coddled me, always let me get ideas. And my father, the weak figure in every version of this story I'd ever lived, finally said something. He said quietly, Patrice, she paid off the bank. $96,000. We'd have lost the store. I never told you because you'd have spent it. And my mother stared at him, and the thing she'd built her whole self on, that she was the one with the class, the one who'd married down and risen anyway, cracked right down the middle because it turned out the family had been kept afloat for a decade by the daughter she'd just sent to the kitchen. He almost stood up for me. That's the most he could do. He told the truth in private, when it was too late to matter, the way he'd always done. I don't hate him for it, but I want to be honest with you. He didn't follow me out to the dock either. The weak ones rarely do. If you've been waiting your whole life for the parent who almost defends you to finally fully defend you, I'm sorry. Sometimes the apology you're owed just never comes, and the kindest thing you can do for yourself is stop standing by the door waiting for it. Brielle came out to the dock. My golden child sister, the one they'd spent the wedding and the condo and the lifetime of preference on. She sat down on the other side of me, not Lorna's side, and for a long minute she didn't say anything. Then she said, "I didn't know about the money, the wedding, the down payment. I thought Dad." And she stopped, because we both knew Dad never had $30,000 in his life. "It was you," she said. "All of it was you. All of it was me," I said. "And here's the thing about Brielle, and the reason I'm not going to make her a complete villain for you, even though it would be a cleaner story." She started to cry, real crying, not the pretty kind. "I let them call you that," she said. "My whole life. I let them say you were the cleanup and I was the party. And you were the one paying for the party the whole time." She's not redeemed. One good cry doesn't undo 30 years. But she's the only one of them who walked out to the dock and said the true thing out loud, and I'll give her that much. My mother never came out. She never apologized. The last thing she said to me that night, when I went in to oversee the staff breaking down my own pavilion, was, "You've humiliated this family." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Just one more attempt to make her cruelty my crime. I'd told you to brace for that, and now you know why. Let me tell you how it settled, person by person, because I closed every thread and I want you to see that I did it cleanly, not cruelly. That distinction is the whole difference between revenge and justice, and Grandpa Walt would have wanted me on the right side of it. The cabins were booked through Sunday. I didn't throw anyone out into the night like a movie villain. I let the out-of-town relatives sleep in the beds I'd paid for, the innocent ones, the cousins and great-aunts who'd flown in with no idea what my mother had planned, hadn't done anything but show up to a party. They got their weekend. They left Sunday with full stomachs and a story they'll tell for the rest of their lives. I have no quarrel with the people who never looked down on me. The business guarantee, the $96,000 I'd paid to save my father's store, I'd long since converted that into a proper note. With terms, because being the dependable one had finally taught me to put things on paper. After the reunion, I didn't call it in to ruin him. I called it in to end it. I sold the note to a small business lender at a fair price and washed my hands of being my father's secret bank. He keeps his store. He just keeps it without me underneath it. There's a difference between letting someone fall and finally stopping carrying them. I chose to stop carrying. The lake house, their house, the one I'd put the $44,000 into for the roof and the second mortgage, I never said a word about. They get to keep it. I'm not in the business of putting old people on the street, even old people who hurt me. But the quiet transfers stopped. The 2 a.m. phone line closed. The blank check that had my whole life signed on it got torn up. And not with a speech. Just with a silence where the yes used to be. Brielle and I are not close, but she texts sometimes, small things, and she paid me back the $30,000 over the following year, in installments, without my asking, which is more than I expected and exactly what I needed her to do. Mercy isn't the same as reunion. I let her stay in my life at the distance she earned, and the staff, Theo, the servers, the cooks who heard my mother call them the help, and then watched their boss own the room. I gave every one of them a bonus that Monday, and a note that said, "Thank you for your class," because they had more of it than anyone at that head table. I kept the place card, the little laminated one with my name on it that my mother set at the dish pit table. I have it in the top drawer of my desk at Heron Point, and I look at it sometimes, not as a wound, but as a fact. It's the cheapest thing I own, and it taught me the most expensive lesson I ever learned, so I think that's a fair trade. Here is what the whole day finally taught me, and it's the only piece of this I'd ask you to take with you. The people who tell you to know your class are almost always describing a room they're afraid to find out you already own. My mother spent 40 years deciding which of her daughters was the party and which was the cleanup, and she never once noticed that the name on the building had been mine the whole time, that the woman she sent to sit with the hired help was the only reason there was a help to sit with. They forgot who booked the venue. People like that always do. They're so busy assigning your seat that they never wonder who's holding the lease. So if this reminded you of someone who's been treating your steadiness like a blank check, who's been so sure of your class that they never bothered to learn your worth, I want you to do one quiet thing this week. Don't make a speech. Don't scream. Just stop holding up the part of their life that only stands because you're standing under it, and watch how fast they remember your name. Share this with someone who's always been the dependable one, the one who pays and fixes and gets sat at the kitchen table in a room she could buy twice over. Drop a comment and tell me about the moment you finally stopped carrying it. I read every one of them, and I promise you're not the only one who's been called the help in a house she was funding. Hit subscribe, because the next one is about a woman whose family read her out of the will at the lawyer's office and forgot she was the one who'd written the trust. And you're going to want to be here when that document hits the table. And I'll see you in the next one.